All right, I want to welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining me this afternoon or evening, depending on where you're at. Anyway, I'm glad that you're with me. We're just going to get started in just a couple minutes. But in the meantime, if you have a question, please put it in the chat and I will do my best to answer your questions. Again, thank you for joining today. One of the things that I'd like to bring up as we get started today is we are trying to do a regular webinar once a week with the team of the four of us therapists. We were doing the math the other day, and there's about 90 years of clinical experience between the four of us. So, a lot of clinical experience, a lot of working with individuals. And so, we're just glad that you're joining us. These webinars are live, but they're also being recorded, and they are then placed in the free webinar series at humanintimacy.com. So if you would like to join us, we would love to have you join us. All right, so as we get started today, one of the things that I would like to address is something that maybe a bigger picture of what I'm doing and why it matters. And part of me, because I've been doing therapy for so many years, I found that so many individuals, when they come into my office, they really don't have the relationship skills that help them create the kind of relationships that they want and that they long for. Now, as a result, when we're in my office and we're role playing, many of them haven't had the skills taught to them. They really don't know how to say certain things, how to connect on purpose, how to understand what their partner's saying. And more often than not, in fact, just happening today in my office, couples are talking, but it's a apples and orange conversation. They don't know how to communicate effectively. So as a result of my just observing this, one of my core goals is actually to help individuals learn the skills so they can have the kind of relationships that they long for. So I'm here to share this information. I hope it's helpful for you. Again, if you have questions, please feel free to add them to the chat. So I'm just going to go ahead and jump in. Today's topic is what I am referring to as on being an intimate human being. And so I'd like you to think about it for a second in terms of just your comfort level with closeness, with opening up, with connecting with the people closest to you. Would you say that you're comfortable? And then if you look at it through your lifespan, would you say that you've felt comfortable connecting with the people closest to you? So if you want to put your thoughts on the chat in the chat, I'd love to just get a little bit of your feedback of just how comfortable are you with connecting with other people? On a scale of, let's say, between zero, not at all, and say seven being the best, yeah, I'm very comfortable connecting with other people. Or do I hold back or do I have reservations? So these are things that I would invite you to think about. And if you are willing to, feel free to put your response in the chat. I'd love to get a little bit of feedback. I should mention, are you guys able to hear me okay? If you could just put yes there, make sure that I'm able to be heard. That would be great. All right. All right. So uh, I would say that I've not felt comfortable connecting with others, trying to connect to with connection with my higher power with Christ, and so it's not compromised. Okay, all right. So anyone else want to add in there? That would be great. But it sounds like you can hear me okay, which is good. So now let me just continue down this process of human connection. Now, I want you to put it in a couple of different ways for me. When we're an intimate human being, what do you even imagine that looks like? If you and I were just sitting, just imagine that you and I are sitting, you're in my office, and together we're just talking. I said, okay, what does a healthy relationship look like? What are the two people doing to connect? What does their conversation sound like? How do they spend their time with each other? Again, I'm inviting you to think about this process of how we connect with one another. Because more often than not, at least in my experience, when individuals are trying to communicate, sometimes we just aren't, it really isn't a communication where we're feeling heard and for feeling seen. Dr. Dan Siegel uses the phrase feeling felt. So I'm going to be going through not just your current relationships today on being an intimate human being. This is a lifelong journey. And this is one of the core things that I hope to get across is human intimacy is done over the lifespan. It starts in our childhood, but in many cases, it ends in those final moments of someone's last breath. Human intimacy across the lifespan, when it's done proper and it's done well, it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. So again, I'm inviting you to think about this process of human connection, human intimacy. And if we're going to be intimate human beings, then we've got to learn how to do that. We've got to learn how to be intimate. And again, it's not inherited. And if I can say one thing over and over and over again, human intimacy is not something that we are initially, it's not inside of us in terms of we know automatically how to do it. We have to learn the skills how to communicate because we often see things or people or situations as a threat, especially when we've had childhood experiences where we have been hurt, when other people have let us down. I do both men and women's groups, and one of the most consistent things that I have found is that most people that I'm working with have a lifelong story of being put down, hurt, ridiculed, bullied, abandoned, rejected by family members. And so we actually live in this society where trust is low. And so my hope today is to talk about this process of being an intimate human being. Now, I want to make it really clear here. I'm not talking about sexuality. That may be a part of being an intimate human being, but connection. Dan Siegel's word, feeling felt. That's ultimately what I'm looking for in this human connection, in this human journey together. So the reality is, I think we're struggling in relationships because we don't have the skills. And I want to walk you through this process today. Hopefully, it will be helpful to you. So I'm going to share my screen with you at this point. This is just a short presentation, but I want to share with you. This is again, this is on being an intimate human being. If you have questions, again, feel free to put them in the queue. But I want to start off with this statement on being an intimate human being. From our earliest memories to our current relationships, so the earliest to current, we determine if we can trust people, if we trust others. Do I trust you? Can you trust me? If not, how do I make it so people can trust me or I can trust others? Now, again, a big part of my work has been conducted around betrayal, infidelity, but not only that, but working with those who have been unfaithful and looking at what's happening, looking at the reasons why. And ultimately, I have found that there's hurt and pain across the board, meaning those who act out typically are coping in unhealthy ways by acting out, but they still long for human intimacy. That's a deep desire. So one of the core things, using a phrase from Dr. Sue Johnson, it's this, are people going to be there for me? We question that. Are people there for me? Well, can I trust you? And when the answer is yes, then we form a bond and we connect with other people. But what happens? What happens when the answer is no? I don't believe that you will be there for me. I ask you the question because I want you to think about it. What happens when the answer is I don't think you'll be there for me? How do I respond? Do I pull back? Do I reach out and so to speak, beg for your love? Do you see what I'm trying to get at here is when the answer is no, then I'm going to hold back. I'm not going to connect. I'm not going to be that intimate human being, which I'm going to argue a little bit later using some of Dr. Sue Johnson's work. We long for that connection, for that bond. That's really one of the first instinctive things we have is that human bond and that human connection. But it's only life's experiences that make us question whether we can connect or not. If we want to learn how to have these deep, meaningful relationships, then we have to learn how to be an intimate human being. And that's really what my topic is about today. So many people who are going to be tuning into this, they're dealing with other life issues, addictions, traumas. And I'm going to tell you part of the answer to working through trauma and through addiction, any form of addiction, working through relationship conflict, It's how do I become this intimate human being? That means I have to work through this and learn how to be an intimate human being again. I think in our infancy, it's what we hopefully experienced, but far too many haven't. All right. So, four core things today. I want to, first of all, talk about our first connections. And I'm just going to put it in the context of over time, one of the most critical time frames is actually in our infancy. They say that our attachment bond is formed in the first 3 years of our lives. So the ultimate question that we ask in our infancy, and it's not a mature brain, but it's something that we observe. And it's this question that Sue Johnson says that we continue to ask over our life. And it's this: will you be there for me? If yes, and if no, what are the outcomes? If yes, what's the outcome? If no, what's the outcome? So we're going to talk a little bit about that. Then we're going to be talking about the journey to attachment. Core concepts: trust. Trust allows us to bond. We then create connections. We then have stability. And as a part of that, we have empathy and compassion. I'm going to be talking a little bit about the difference of those today because I think we misuse empathy, and really what we're talking about is more of compassion. I'm then going to talk about overcoming our personal fears because more often than not, it's our personal fears that hold us back from being an intimate human being. While we are designed for intimacy, our fears hold us back. If we're going to truly connect with other people, there is a deep and profound connection that can occur. But we have to overcome those fears. And then we're going to talk a little bit about this practicing it across the lifespan. All right, so let's see if there's any questions at this point. Let me see if there's any questions or comments. I find I respond with solutions as if it is a problem for the other person. Interesting. So what you're describing here is I come up with solutions. And I'm going to tell you one of the most effective things that we do as we become intimate human beings is we seek to understand others on a level where they are at. And we really try to understand them. Who is this person? As we seek solutions, remember a friend of mine, Ken Patey, he said it really well. He said the seeds to the solutions to your problems, my problems, lie within me. The same is true of you. The seeds to the solutions to your challenges, your problems, lie within you. In other words, you know answers. When I do intensives, one of the things that's most fascinating to me is one of the core events that I do with couples is I have them walk through what's called the drama triangle or Cartman triangle. And one of the things that I do with them is I actually have them identify what they can do to stay out of the old patterns. And inevitably, they know the answers. They know the answers. So again, we want to give solutions. I think that's a normal thing for us. But can we trust people enough? And can we, as individuals, seek those solutions and act upon them? Because in most cases, when we act upon those solutions that are instinctively inside of us, we're not deceiving ourselves anymore. Instead, quite the opposite. We're gaining trust because we're seeking the solutions on how to be better and how to be more intimate, more connected. All right. Any other questions? Feel free to put them in the chat. Thank you for sharing that. All right. Whoops. Whoop, wrong one. That's interesting. All right. So I want you, if you'd be willing to, I'd like you to answer this question. What did you learn about relationships as a child? And if you'd be willing to put that into the chat, I'd really appreciate that. What did you learn about relationships as a child? Could you trust people? Did you trust others? Did you have fun? Did you learn that people are fun and you can interact with them? Again, just inviting you to think about the messages that you learn about relationships as a child. People will be there for me. People won't be there for me. Now, again, this is on being an intimate human being. If I learned that people would be there for me, then I began to trust people and I knew that they were reliable and that if I had a problem, I could turn to them. But what happens if they weren't there for me? What happens if I came home from school and I wasn't able to open up and talk with somebody? A few years ago, I was working with an individual, and she said I would come home from school knowing full well that when I got home, I would have a full duty of house chores. I would get home, my mother would be in her room, my dad, he worked and worked and worked and was never available. And so she learned basically that she had to raise herself. She would get up in the morning, she would basically cook breakfast for her and her younger siblings. And then she'd get everyone off to school because mom was extremely depressed. And then she would do the same thing in the afternoon, make dinner in the evening. And she basically became the mom when she was about 13. So what did she learn about relationships as a child? I have to take care of myself. As now maturing into adult years, she was the caregiver. And so what did she learn about relationships as a child? You got to take care of things yourself. So her challenge, as we went through those types of exercises, her challenge was, I don't trust people are going to be there for me. They're going to let me down. And so if she started to see a hint of, say, her husband pulling away, her husband having a difficult day, she would trigger into, oh, I've got to take care of everything. I got to find the solutions. What's your story? What did you learn? For me personally, we struggled on how to solve problems. I didn't see it a lot in my childhood. I didn't see my parents go through conflictual situations. So when I got married, I didn't know how to communicate very well. Again, I'm asking you, what's your story? What did you learn about this attachment? And ultimately then, if I'm going to be an intimate human being, I've got to learn how my past is influencing my present. And then not only do I have to learn how to do it, then I have to learn how to specifically overcome my fears so I can be that person that I want to be, that natural, real me. Again, I'm inviting you to think about, what did you learn about relationships as a child? All right, I'm going to tell you this picture, these pictures. Look at the mom's eyes, would you? Just looking at her eyes. What do you see there? A proud mom. Look at this child who's so intent of putting this block on the other blocks. Human intimacy. The excitement of a mother seeing a child progress and do something. That's cool. That's cool. Or how about this one? A dad and his son. Son's arm around the dad. I just look at these kind of pictures, and it's just one of those times where I'm like, this is human intimacy in action. This is what we all need or needed, and it's what we still all long for. And now as we continue this, human intimacy then is the bonding of friendships. Developmentally in our teen years, critical time frames. What were your teen years like? Did you have connection? Did you have support? Did you have friendships? Or were you isolated? Were you alone? If we're going to be, again, these intimate human beings, we have to look at our story across the lifespan, not just in this moment, across the lifespan, and see how those developmental times had impact or influence on us. So we look at the beginning years, infant, child, young child, mom, dad, connection, no connection, trust, no trust. Then we look at our other relationships, our friendships, connection, loneliness, isolation, bonding. Which one's is it? Which one is it? Now we move on and we say, okay, this journey to attachment then begins with the first concept is always safety. You've heard me talk about that before if you follow my work. The journey to attachment is always based upon this concept of, am I safe? Am I safe with you? Are you safe with me? Can I trust you? When we let down the guard, then that's really because we feel safe in your presence. And then there was a concept, and if I could put it in this, if we had circles around us, and we are in this inner circle, it's our inner circle. Who's in the inner circle with you? Do you allow people into that inner circle, or do you keep them at a distance, say one circle away, or two circles away, or three circles away? If you want to try a really interesting exercise, draw a circle, put yourself in there, and then identify who the people are in your inner circle. Who's on the next level, say that first circle around your inner circle? Who's in the second circle, in the third circle, in the fourth circle, and who doesn't belong in your circles at all? And then look at how much time you're spending with each of these people in your circles. You want an interesting exercise? Try it, see what happens. If you don't have people in your inner circle, why? I invite you to think about that. All right, so who's in your inner circle? If you don't have people in your inner circle, why? All right, next is what healthy attachment looks like. So I'm going to push pause here for a second, and I'm going to ask you to go to the chat, and I'm going to ask you to put in, what does healthy attachment look like to you? What's happening in a healthy relationship? So I'm going to push pause here on that screen, and I'm going to invite you, just do me a favor, right? What does that look like? What does healthy attachment to you look like? What's happening? So I'll wait for you in the chat for just a second as you consider this. What does a healthy attachment look like? What's happening? Who's doing what? What are you doing? I invite you to go to the chat and put that in. By the way, thanks again for joining me today. All right, healthy attachment. What's it look like? And while I'm waiting for your responses, a little bit of fun things. Our podcast is continuing. We had a really interesting conversation with Marianne Michaelis on healthy and unhealthy sexuality. That was our most recent podcast. So again, I'm waiting for your responses on what healthy attachment looks like. I see being able to be vulnerable. Yeah. So I'm curious about that. What does vulnerability look like? What does it sound like? Can I? It's being open, right? It's being able to share your thoughts, and it's being able to share your feelings. All right. So there's that component. I'm able to be vulnerable. What other things lead to attachment? All right. So recently, over the past several years, I've consciously decided that healthy attachment includes humor. Yes. So we're having fun. We're being playful. It's enjoyable. Safety with expressing who I am and being and becoming, right? So being safe and expressing myself, my thoughts, my ideas. I love it. Also, with asking for the space to have lots of time to reflect in your relationship with your Heavenly Father, your higher power. Yeah. So again, healthy attachment is allowing ourselves to be this person who's seen, and we allow ourselves to connect. Do you allow yourself to connect, or do you hold back? And I'm going to get to this in a minute. But if you're holding back, why is it? Because you feel shame? It has been my experience that if we're holding back in relationships, it's because we have a lot of shame. Again, just putting it in context. Am I holding back because I feel shame? All right. Anyone else have any thoughts? Let's see. It's a question. How do we know if we are connecting? One of the things that we know that we're connecting is our physiologically. So I'm going to go first from physiologically. You know you're connecting when your body is relaxed in the other person's presence. Now relaxed is different. Say for some people, relaxed means that you don't feel a sense of threat. It also means that you can open up and share. It means that you don't have to feel guilty for this connection. And what I mean by that is it is a healthy, safe, connecting person to you. So it's not betraying yourself because you feel comfortable with somebody. You are trusting self, and you're trusting this person with who you are. So connection is a really profound thing. That one of the most powerful connections is a mother-infant bond, especially when the mother's nursing. The baby's getting nourishment, they're getting healthy touch, they're getting a connection. So as we bond, we create an environment where the other person and us, our bodies, are feeling like I can be connecting with you. And I'm not talking about sex. I'm talking about our bodies physiologically in your presence. It's the smile. If I go back to those images, if you look at those friends, if you look at the father son, if you look at the mother child, you often would see the interaction, the playful interaction. That's what connection is. All right. So another comment is no secrets. Absolutely spot on. Again, if I'm having attachment, it's also what's not happening. There aren't secrets. There aren't hidden behaviors. So when I'm truthful, when I'm honest, when I'm transparent, saying it another way, then you see me and I'm not hiding. I don't feel like I have to hide anything. What you see, the phrase we use here is WYSIWYG. What you see is what you get. And that really means that I'm a person of integrity. You can see me, you can predict me. And that's how I become an intimate human being. And that's how you become an intimate human being. When we hold back, when we hide ourselves, our thoughts, our emotions from each other, because we don't feel like we are heard, that we don't feel like we can be understood, then we can't be that fully intimate human being because I'm holding back and you are holding back. Then human attachment is when we are present with each other, not holding back, but sharing ourselves with one another. All right. Thank you so much for your comments. Thank you for sharing your thoughts there. All right. All right. So we've looked at that, what healthy attachment looks like. Now let me look at this third part. And this is actually a little bit of difference. I want to explain this because far too often what I found is that people misunderstand empathy and compassion, and we're not necessarily using them in a way that it's actually, in my mind, it may be creating more problems. Empathy is, in the phrase we use in therapy or in research, is operationally defined. How do you define it? And this is a quote by Leckie and Eichels or Ickes, and it is defined as feeling someone else's pain or negative emotion. Now, I could say that empathy could also be feeling joy. So I would add the other emotions along with this. But if we deconstruct empathy from a neurobiological, if we did it from a biological perspective, empathy then should be associated with activation of our sympathetic nervous system. In other words, if I am feeling your pain, interestingly enough, it might be putting me into fight or flight mode, which is the sympathetic nervous system. Is that interesting? So I've met with many individuals who say, my partner doesn't feel empathy. But when I get to know them, it's actually quite opposite. They overfeel, and their overfeeling shuts them down or puts them into fight mode. So it's not that some people don't have empathy. It's they don't know what to do when they feel empathy. It shuts them down or puts them into fight. Different way of conceptualizing it, right? And so if I'm going to be an intimate human being, that means I have to learn how to be with people in their pain. This is a social problem. Go talk with somebody who's lost a loved one recently to death or been through a difficult divorce. And they hear some of the most unhelpful statements because other people say things or do things that are not validating, that are hurtful and harmful. Not because people are intentionally hurting them. It's because when we're doing it, we don't know how to appropriately be with people in their pain, and they feel our presence. And so the difference then between empathy and then compassion, according to Stephen Porges, is associated with a calm vagal state. And what that would do is that would promote a physiological state associated with safety of self, meaning I can be with you, I can be present with you, I'm safe with you in your pain and you feel it. And I project a fascinating word here. I project calmness and acceptance toward the other. This is, if you could walk away today with just this concept, I'm going to become a compassionate person, meaning I'm going to be able to be in your presence and I'm going to practice being with myself in a calm state. And you're going to sense my calmness and I'm going to be able to accept what you're saying. I can't emphasize this concept enough. We've got to learn to be more compassionate. That's human intimacy. That's true human intimacy. All right. And then next concept, if we're going to do it well, we have to identify our personal fears. That means you're going to need to do some work. That means you're going to need to figure some things out. And you're going to need to get to the point where you understand what are my barriers that are preventing me from connecting with others. And then we have to create some strategies to address our fears. And more often than not, we have to deal with our hidden shame. Identify our issues, develop strategies to address it. And if you don't know how to do this, that's where therapy comes in. That's where deeper work comes in. You have to address those personal fears. Otherwise, we're more prone to just keep doing the same thing, not just now, but for generations to come. If we don't do the work now, who's going to do it? If we don't learn how to be intimate human beings, who's going to do it? When I look at family trees and I see generations and generations of negative beliefs, shame, we continue to pass it down from generation to generation to generation. Why don't we choose to do it differently? Why don't we choose to be these intimate human beings? And in many cases, that means we have to deal with our hidden shame, those beliefs about ourselves, those negative cognitions. I'm unlovable. I'm not enough. I'm a failure. I'm an addict. I'm a bad person. If you don't deal with those, we can't become intimate human beings because they're barriers to deep connection. So, my invitation to you is to identify your fears. What are you so afraid of in being an intimate human being? And then strategies. If you need strategies, don't just sit back and wait for someone to come to you. Go get them. Be proactive. Ask questions. How do I overcome these fears? What can I do in my interaction with you, my partner, or my children? Well, how can I be a better, more intimate human being? And in most cases, we carry shame, and we need to address our shame. So I invite you to think about that. All right. Questions, comments that you guys have? See, open and honest. Secrets. Question, can personal boundaries come across as negativity when they are unexpressed verbally? If they're not expressed verbally, then your boundaries are probably not known. So yes, a person, how are they going to read you? How are they going to understand you if it's not spoken? They're reading your body language. And if we leave it to body language, I might be more sensitive because I've been hurt by other people. And so if I've been hurt by other people and you remind me of somebody of my past, then for sure I might be pulling back and I might be holding back. So yeah, personal boundaries, they can come across negatively when they're not expressed because we assume that the other person is going to understand what we're feeling and what we're thinking. And that relies upon their previous life experiences to interpret what we're trying to say. Our body language of safety is a presence with you where I'm open, where I'm allowing this connection. I'm creating it. You feel safe with my presence. But when we don't do that, and I assume that you're going to understand me, I'm assuming that somehow you're going to be able to read me. We don't read each other well when we've been in trauma or addiction. We don't listen well. We anticipate, we see what we think we're seeing. And more often than not, when we think something, we may or may not be right. And more often than not, when we've been in difficult relationships, I hear you differently. I see your body language differently. I see you as a threat. I see you as an enemy. I don't understand it. That's why when we don't really understand people, it's because we are assuming that we know them. Far too often, we don't know people because we don't take the time to get to know them. All right. How to connect simply and purely after maybe a full day of communication that has included reinforcing boundaries. Again, if it's reinforcing boundaries, the question is why are we continuously needing to reinforce boundaries? Why are we needing to do that? Right? If I'm continuously needing to reinforce boundaries, that means that our boundaries are not clear because somebody's trying to either evade into the other person's boundary. And so again, if I'm creating an environment, the people around me are not going to continuously feel like I've got to protect myself. That should not be the case in our relationships where we feel like we have to continually protect ourselves. Again, safety, this environment where you feel comfortable in my presence. And again, helping couples rebuild a relationship when there's been hurt and pain, whether that's some kind of abuse or some kind of sexual betrayal, when couples don't understand each other, then that rebuilding of the trust is they begin to communicate more effectively. They're more open, they're more honest, and they're transparent. They're being intimate human beings. We have to learn how to do that if we're going to succeed. All right. Question, trying to ask about changing dynamics and communicating with those not in the near circle, those who are, okay. So I guess what I'm taking out of this question is if they're in an outer circle, you have to decide if you want them in or not. There's a reason why they're in the outer circle. Did they break trust or not break trust? Were they with you when you're in pain, or did they judge you? So we have to decide where people are at and why they are. So if you really want to go through that exercise I just went through with you, again, inner circle, 1 circle out, 2 circles out, 3 circles out. Put the people who you're interacting with, literally label it. Okay, this is my brother Larry, and this is my sister Susan, and this is my mom, and this is my dad. Where are these people, and why are they where they're at? You define it. Now, how do I communicate with them knowing that I've got them in the outer circle? Do I want them to come closer? Is that possible or is that not possible? It's a phenomenal exercise if you'll go through it. You'll learn a lot about your inner circle and those people close to you. All right. Great questions. Excuse me. Do you have any other questions for me today? Again, just feel free to ask your questions. I say thank you again for showing up. All right. I'm not seeing any other questions. Okay, so let me just close with a couple of things. If we're going to be intimate human beings, me, you, all of us, if we are going to be intimate human beings, you see, a lot of people, we spend time thinking about what we're trying to not do, or we're trying to overcome something, difficulty, trauma, our past. Why can't we also focus on being better in relationships? If you really, really want to live life to its fullest, it really is in your human connections. That's where you're going to get the most human connection possible. Let yourself be an intimate human being. Be present. Be consistent. Be there. Be an intimate human being. That's my invitation to you. All right, so just real quick, if you'll hold on with me for just a second, I want to show you a short video I created. Some of you may have seen this, but I'm gonna show you real quick. Again, it's gonna take me just a second to pull it up. right. As we get ready to close today, do you have any final questions for me on being an intimate human being? A couple of things to be aware of next week. Marianne is going to be talking about boundaries. Then we'll have Dr. Robinson talking with us about mental health issues and helping family members struggling with mental health issues. That will then conclude this 8-week webinar series. And then we are going to change it up a little bit for upcoming webinars. We'll do it based upon topic and based upon your requests. So I'll be sending out information seeking topics that you would like us to cover. And then we'll be addressing topics that you would like us to cover. These first 8 are just topics that we already have content for in the Human Intimacy website. So any final questions that you have for me before we get ready to close up today? If not, just let me close with a couple of final thoughts. This is a question for you. Right now, today, this moment, how would you say you are at creating human intimacy and human connection? Do a self-evaluation. How are you doing? Again, I just invite you to think about that. How am I doing at being an intimate human being? What are my barriers? Am I developing compassionate? Am I being a compassionate being? If you answer that question, I am being compassionate. That means other people feel my presence when they are suffering. I'm doing the best I can with that. And if I've got barriers, am I addressing my barriers? Those are the core questions I invite you to think about today. All right, those are some closing thoughts. We can all be better, more intimate human beings. Me too. Me too. So thank you for being a part of this journey with me. I genuinely appreciate it. Again, I'll hang around if you have any questions, but if not, then I will just say thank you for joining me today. I appreciate it. I hope you're not getting too hot with the weather outside. It's definitely been hot where we are. So thank you for your time. May each of you be blessed in all that you're doing, and I will look forward to seeing you again soon. Please feel free to share our webinars with others. Feel free to just keep us posted if you have questions. Again, if you have questions at humanintimacy.com. We'll do our best to address your questions. Thanks everybody for joining tonight. You guys have a very good evening and be more intimate human beings. Thank you very much.